This is the first time, though, that we've been able to have an expert in crash reconstruction, motorcycle crash reconstruction, speak. James Locke, he is from College Station, and he's a crash reconstructionist, traffic safety expert with Collision Research Associates. And he's going to talk to you today about motorcycle crash investigation. Welcome.
Good morning. I just want to talk a little bit about what we're interested in motorcycle accident investigation, and then a little bit more about why we're interested in it. And from what we've seen already, I think we're all familiar with what we'd like to see. We have collision investigation and also reconstruction. Investigation is what's done every single day by our law enforcement officers in the field for any reported accident. It gives us the basic information about the accident that occurred and a little bit of information about what happened when it occurred. Reconstruction's much more detailed. It takes a much closer look on an individual case. Typically, it's done by our law enforcement officers when there's a fatal collision or if there's a probability of criminal activity. But I'm not going to talk about that today because it's really a whole different subject. In accident investigation, we have three different areas that we're interested in. We're always interested in the human area. We're interested in the environment. And by environment, I don't mean the weather. I mean everything excluding the human in the vehicle. The roadways that we ride in, the traffic mix, the speeds, roadway conditions, and everything. We also are interested in the vehicles, the vehicle performance, how the vehicle operates, and how the vehicle went through a particular crash. There's two types of crashes that we typically look at. We look at the single vehicle crashes and, of course, multi-vehicle collisions. Single vehicle crashes are commonly coded on the accident reports as a loss of control. And most of them are loss of control accidents, but there's many reasons for their loss of control. We have a lot of run off the roads that's due to excessive speed or speed that is more excessive than the riding capability of the rider. We have contaminants on the roadway that we're always interested in finding and dealing with: gravel, rocks, debris. We have other types of single vehicle crashes like the one I'm showing here, where the driver of a pickup truck swerved into the lane of the motorcycle to avoid another car. So the motorcyclist had to swerve to avoid the pickup, and he hit the curb and crashed. And that's common too. So there's all sorts of crashes that occur that are single vehicle crashes. It may not necessarily be solely the rider's responsibility. On multi-vehicle crashes, we typically see severe crashes. A large percentage of motorcycle crashes and two-vehicle crashes are caused by the motorcycle's rider. And I know that sounds a little strange, but a lot of them that I work are caused by the motorcycle rider. Too much speed and alcohol, the rider putting himself in a position where they are inconspicuous to other traffic, maybe in a blind area when a car is making a turn that doesn't give the car rider a single chance in avoiding. In this particular collision, for example, we have this van that was on a shoulder of a two-way highway, and the woman driving was going to make a U-turn to turn around. And she looked back behind her, and there was a hill crest about 500 feet. She didn't see anything, so she slowly began her U-turn. And this motorcyclist was the lead rider on a small group of riders. And some of the other riders said when they came over the hill, he was running about 130, and then he tucked in, and they couldn't hang with him, so they kind of backed off. Anyway, she went ahead and started her turn, and we had an impact between the bike and the car. You can see where the front end of the bike just embedded itself into the front wheel. The back of the bike is broken off there. It's just a typical catastrophic accident. We actually see quite a few of them like this where the bike's broken in half. This one, the rider was upright when he hit. He didn't put the bike down. He was sitting on the bike. You can see where his right knee went into the base of the windshield right there at the A-pillar. And in fact, it drove his femur into the inside of the car, and his femur is still on the dashboard of the car. Obviously, it was a fatal. What we like to look at and what we like to collect information on in the human area is something we can also use in training, is the rider's behavior. And by rider behavior, I mean the mental attitude and whether or not they ride defensively, whether they drive sober or have drugs. So many of the cases I work, the drivers have alcohol or drugs in their system. And it's not an accident when that happens. I mean, it's just a predictable event. I mean, how many people do you know that would get into an airplane when the pilot is shit-faced drunk? Not many. But we get on motorcycles when we're that way, and why do we do that? And we being just a generic term, not you, Pat. And rider behavior, we have just what the riders do, what they learn. A lot of that can be trained to young drivers. Riders are engaged in sudden emergencies, and we want to know about the sudden emergencies, and we want to build up the instinctive response of a rider so that when they react with a knee-jerk reaction, it is the proper kind of response. A sudden emergency is simply something that happens suddenly that requires an immediate control input to try to avoid. And that control input, if you don't think about it, you don't practice it, you don't mentally go through it and build that process up, will probably be the wrong one. So when you want somebody to have an instinctive response, you want that response to be correct, and that's where people like Maurice can come in, where they teach people repetitively to think about those things. On the pre-crash actions, there have been 2 studies done about 20 years apart. First one was a Hertz study that shows in 34% of the motorcycle accident cases, the rider did nothing, no response whatsoever. Maybe because they were overwhelmed with the sudden emergency, but they drove right into the car. In 37% of the crashes, the rider braked. And in 19%, the rider swerved. But in 50% of those braking and swerving cases, there was a faulty application. Either the rider perhaps only hit the rear brake, or the rider countersteered and didn't brake hard enough, did something to not take advantage of the capabilities of the motorcycle, because the motorcycle has extremely high capabilities. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of practice to engage in that type of dynamic behavior. We have, of course, protective equipment. I'm not going to say much about protective equipment here. There's no argument. We know that it works. You look at MotoGP riders, you see them crash and they get up and walk away. You look at football players. I looked at a few of them yesterday. You look at turtles. You look at armadillos. They got protective equipment. So I got no argument. Unintentional blindness is human factors and psychological area that's really become popular in the last 10 years. And what it really is that a person takes up so much visual stimuli and auditory and thought processes that they can be looking right at something and not see it. And that happens a lot with motorcycles. You always have the motorcycle or the car operator say, I didn't see the motorcycle. And I've had people tell me that with semi-trucks. Why'd you pull out right in front of the semi-truck? I didn't see it. And what we know from all the research that's been done is there's two things that can be done to try to reduce the frequency of unintentional blindness on car drivers. The first one is to increase the conspicuity of the motorcyclist by bright clothing, high beam headlight, and lane position where they can be seen, following distance where they drop back far enough where a left turn driver can tell that there's a motorcycle behind this car. And that's pretty important. The other thing that all the studies refer to is driver expectancies. If you can increase the expectancy of a driver that they're going to encounter a motorcycle, chances are they'll see it. If you know that you're going to see something, you have a much better chance of seeing it. And I was pretty encouraged to see all these billboards and signs and everything that are out because I haven't seen them. But that's what we need. We need to make people, when they look, go, I know there's going to be a motorcycle out here. We have a problem because motorcycles are such a small mix in the traffic population that people just aren't used to seeing them consistently. And this kind of thing really helps because we want people to know that there's motorcycles out there and to expect to see one. In training and accident reconstruction, we like to know what kind of training the people had, what kind of rules they had, what kind of control inputs they were trained so that they can use the controls simultaneously. It's much more difficult to control a motorcycle than it is a car. What if cars had a foot brake and a hand brake? We'd see a lot of control inputs that were done wrong on cars as well. If you had to push the brakes with your foot for the rear brakes and pull a handle for the front brakes on the car, it'd be a mess. And that's the way it is on a motorcycle. So it takes a lot of training, and you have to mentally refresh that. And when you ride, you have to constantly think about it to ingrain that. So again, it's an instinctive response for the motorcyclist. You want the motorcycle rider to have expectancies also. That you want to train them so that they know what to expect cars to do when they feel threatened, and to let them know that they're not just paranoid, they actually have some knowledge of why they feel threatened at the time. Again, protective equipment, we can train people into what kind of alternatives they can have. You don't have to wear a full leather suit for protective equipment in Texas weather. There's all kinds of different equipment, but young riders need to know what's available and what's out there. We need to know in accident reconstruction what kind of experience the riders have, what type of training and retraining. We want people to go through the basic course. We want them to go through the experienced rider course. If they could take track days, it really helps learn how to control a motorcycle by taking track days. The type of riding they do, the riding environment, it changes their behavior. If they ride typically in town and all of a sudden they're riding with a group of people on a nice curvy back road, it's something that's foreign to them. So they have to relearn everything. Again, protective equipment, and I had to throw the photograph of me up on the monster getting ready to pass the sport bike. And the monster's kind of a cruiser style bike. So one thing I see a lot, and one thing that we need to deal with on training is braking. These are two cases here where the riders applied the brakes to keep from hitting a car, and they applied the back brake. Never touched the front brake. They skidded in a straight line. Ultimately, they struck the car. On both of these, I calculated that the rider could have come to a stop easily by using some front brake and not even braking at the maximum rate. And oftentimes, you don't have to come to a stop. If you have a car moving across your path of travel, all you have to do is delay your arrival time to that location because the car is going to move out of the way. So if you brake some with a front brake and get to that location a little bit later, typically about a quarter second to a half second later, there's no collision. And if you look at the rear tire on the motorcycle there, I'll say something about it later, but the rear tire on the motorcycle and the tires on a motorcycle are kind of like a black box on a car. I can look at a motorcycle tire on a crashed bike, and it gives me the history of the rider, how they ride, what they ride, how they were braking, how the bike rotated out and went down. And it's just a lot of information there. That type of thing needs to be documented by the police when it happens before the motorcycle is drug around from location to location. Environmental data, I've talked about most of that. Different places that we ride, different groups that we ride. All of that stuff needs to be known if we're going to eventually try to combine this and come up with some solutions on how to reduce the frequency and severity of these collisions. On the motorcycles themselves, we look at different types of motorcycles. We look at the motorcycle with link brake system, with ABS, and we look at the performance and the characteristics that are memorialized at the crash scene by the tire information and the sliding information, and it's all very important. This is a case I worked not long ago. You can see the swing arm has been extended about 6 inches. It's been lowered 2 inches in the back. On the front forks there, it's got a strap that goes around the steering head and down to the fork tubes, so you can squish the fork tubes all the way down and not have any play in it, kind of like a drag bike. And then this guy had chrome wheels on the bike, so he took the rear brake off so you could see more of the chrome on the wheel. And on the front brake, he took the right side front brake and right side brake caliper off so you could see that chrome wheel too, because it looks a lot better. And he was running about 85 miles an hour when he hit the back of a car that was doing about 23 miles an hour, according to the download on the car. And there was a little alcohol involved on that too, and it was a fatality. Okay, once we collect all this information, what we really have to do is analyze it. The whole purpose of analyzing and looking at crash data is try to improve safety. Data is expensive, it's hard to get. It's very, very difficult to collect a lot of good data. You want to do investigation rather than reconstruction, because NHTSA is spending $5,000 or more on every reconstruction they're doing with their motorcycle program. Look at a macroscopic view of what's going on out there rather than a microscopic. Don't hone in on just the one case. Also, by looking at a large sample size and doing investigations, we can collect a large sample size of data, so we have something statistically valid. We can determine a baseline, do long-term analysis, and then we can get people to analyze it. We collect the data, and we don't concentrate on fatals. Don't just worry about fatal accidents, because the only thing that separates a fatal accident from a non-fatal may be that when the rider slides off the road, in one case they have a head strike on a tree, in another case they don't. They miss the tree by a few inches. But the pre-crash data, what caused that crash to occur, is exactly the same. So we should collect data and look at all crashes. And how do we do that? We use the, I always call it the ST3, but it's called the CR3 now. Commercial vehicles, they use a supplement form because we're really interested in commercial vehicle accidents. So you have a commercial vehicle, you pull an extra form, fill it out. Let's do that for motorcycles. Why can't we develop a one-page form, maybe front and back, where we put detailed information that we need, and every time there's a motorcycle accident, you grab your CR3, but you grab that one page, and we give the police officers a little bit of training. It wouldn't take much training to fill it out. It gives us some good information. We take people like human factors engineer, highway engineers, take Dr. Brackett, Milburn over there, people like Maurice, and put together just a small list of variables on that form that will really help us get where we need to be. And it's cheap and easy to do, and we'd be doing more than any other state because we would have a large sample size of data. Anyway, I always say to everybody when I'm in trial, that you can't control the environment that you're operating in. However, you can alter your behavior to allow you to travel safely in that environment. Slow down. And that's really all I had to talk about today. I could have spread it out over about a semester or at least 2 weeks, but I don't have time. Yes, sir.
I like your idea of adding that extra space in there for motorcycle-specific accident investigations, and I agree that there needs to be more training. Wouldn't that fall under DPS to come up with a training unit?
Actually, Patty's working on something like that now. We're not going to teach them how to do reconstruction, so they don't have to have a whole lot of training. But in one day, I could take everybody in this room and give you enough training where you could be very competent at filling out the kind of information that we need to look at driver behavior, the environment, and the motor vehicle to add to another form. And it's not that difficult. Anything else? That's it. Thank you.